That story is an important part of my history. I do not mind telling it again. It happened not long after I got my scars. I stopped off in Windhelm on my way to Riften. I arrived weary, bloody, and fragrant. All I wanted was a hot meal and a room for the night, but it was not to be. As soon as I entered the city, I felt the weight of distrustful eyes upon me. I was too tired to care. I made my way to Candlehearth Hall and tried to purchase a room. I was told in no uncertain terms that I was not welcome and that I should seek shelter elsewhere. While I was explaining that I had gold and would cause no trouble, I noticed 3 brawny men watching me with interest. I turned from the innkeep and faced the men. "You fellows see something strange?" I asked. "No, friend," replied the nearest. "We see a man who needs a bed and a bath, but we fear you won't find them here. If you have coin, maybe we can help you." I am not surprised she was wary. Maybe it was because I am Khajiit, but perhaps it was just my bloody face and weaponry she distrusted. Anyway, I told the men I would happily part with a few coins for a room. They said they were brothers, and for 15 septims, I would be a guest in their home that night. They told me that their mother would be happy to set another place at their table. I did not have many options, so I agreed. Easy for you to say that now, but I was exhausted, and my judgment was asleep. The men took me to a deserted alleyway and motioned for me to stop. The youngest brother turned to me and said, "Before we continue, we must have your word that you will keep what we are about to show you to yourself." "No problem," I replied. He nodded, then felt along the stone wall, paused, then knocked 4 times. There was a grinding noise, and a large section slid back to reveal a torchlit passageway. "Who are you people?" I asked as we entered the gap in the wall. "Do not be alarmed," said the eldest brother. "Hot food and a warm bed are waiting up ahead." We pressed on, and the entrance closed behind us. We soon came to a heavy wooden door. The youngest brother stepped forward and again knocked 4 times. I heard a key turn on the other side. A grunt, the door opened, and I was face to face with the oldest woman I have ever seen. "We have a guest, dear mother," said the eldest brother. "Well, come in then. Table set, go wash your hands. You weren't followed, were you?" No, he replied, pushing past her. "Come in, friend. You're safe, and soon you'll be fed." I stepped inside. I was in a huge stone room full of all manner of useless junk and trinkets. There were no windows and it was very dim, but I could make out a row of beds against the far wall near a large open fire. The old woman looked up at me. "Got money?" She held out a gnarled hand. "Of course," I said, handing it over. "Thank you for letting me rest here. What is your name?" "Everyone just calls me Mother," she said. "You can do the same if you like. Makes no difference to me." She motioned for me to sit at a long table where the other men were already eating greedily. I sat and tucked in. There was soup and roast beef and vegetables, and I ate until I thought I was going to rupture. When we were done, I was taken to a corner sectioned off by hanging furs. Inside, there was a steaming bath. I sank into it, felt my poor muscles relax, and shut my eyes. I drifted off. I had some very strange dreams. I saw the brothers caper and dance and fly about the room. I saw Fergus in a pool of blood staring up at me, mouthing the words, "Run, Inigo, run!" I saw a vast glass cage with a rough and scored ceiling. I saw many things I have now forgotten. When I awoke, the room was spinning and bleary. I heard the deep, muffled voices. Then I saw what was next to me, and my heart froze. No, not a spider. An interesting but less squishy creature. What I saw was the king of dragonflies, the largest dragonfly imaginable. He was in a massive jar to my left, and he was spinning about in a frenzy. That is when I realized I was in a jar of my own. I tried to call out for help, but no words came. I looked down at my hands and saw that they were missing. I now seemed to have pincers. I leapt to my feet in horror and bounced off the inside of the jar. Suddenly, I realized I was flying. You and your skepticism, my friend. I am telling you what I remember. Nothing more. I buzzed about for a bit, trying to get used to my new wings. After a while, I had things under control. I realized that the handsome dragonfly in the jar next to mine was not so large after all. I had been made small, like him. I also saw that we were not alone. A number of other jars were in a row to my left, each holding an insect. There were butterflies and glow bugs, and moths too. My vision was blurred by the jar, but I could still make out 4 enormous figures at the far end of the now seemingly cavernous room. One of them pointed in my direction and laughed. The sound was booming and very scary. The individual approached, and I saw it was Mother. I heard a noise from my right, looked over, and saw that my dragonfly neighbor had fallen down dead with fright. Indeed, my sadness was soon overwhelmed by fear, I am sorry to say. I was trapped, and I had no idea what this witch wanted with me. Mother came right up to my jar and tapped an enormous grubby finger against the glass. Her toothless grin filled my view. She then picked up the dragonfly's jar, shook it, scowled, and slammed it back down. She grabbed another jar, this time from my left, removed the lid and plucked out the moth inside. It feebly flapped between her fingers. She held it up to my jar, then forced the poor creature into her mouth. I heard the body crunch between her gums. That is when I heard a voice inside my head. It was well spoken and calm. It was the voice of a scholar giving a lesson to a dim child. It said, "Pay attention. Go still and she will not eat you." Mother swallowed the moth and picked up my jar again. I let myself go limp and lay motionless. I seemed to be missing my eyelids, so I was forced to watch as she first uncapped my jar, then reached inside. Her gigantic hand paused before it reached me, then withdrew. "Stay still," said the voice in my head. It was hard, but I managed. Mother held my jar up and studied me. She shook me, then studied me again. "Passed out," she said with a voice like an avalanche. "Scared him senseless." She put my jar down and turned away. "You'll have to get me more. I need to eat tonight." Another huge figure came into view. It was the eldest brother. "Mother," he said, "why do you have to frighten them so?" "Because they taste better squirming and fearful. You know that." Her son sighed, woke his brothers, and left.
I like it here.
Mother turned and made for her bed. That is when I heard the dragonfly yell in my head. "Your jar! Hit the wall of your jar!" Mother had placed me on the shelf with the base of my jar hanging over the edge. I leapt towards the glass, flapping my wings as fast as I could. I bounced back, then hit it again and again. I toppled off the shelf and smashed on the stone floor. "Yes," cried the dragonfly. "Lay still. She's coming back." So there I lay, surrounded by shattered glass, as Mother approached us a second time. I thought she was going to step on me, but instead she cursed and knelt down. I heard her joints creak. "I'll have to get you a new jar, or I could just eat you now. Not tasty, but tempting." I wanted to flap my wings. I wanted to fly and hide, but I did not. She picked me up. Her grimy face filled my view. She smiled and licked her lips. She opened her mouth. Not as scary as living it, my friend. Do not worry, it ends well. Anyway, as her mouth drew nearer, I started to flap my wings. I could not help it. I wanted to escape. Alas, she was too strong and I was too small. Suddenly, there was a bonk noise, and Mother's jaw went slack. Her muddy eyes rolled back, and she collapsed. I struggled out from under her hand and saw the dragonfly's jar rolling to a stop near a chair leg. "You knocked her out," I yelled in my mind. "Yes," he replied. "Thank you," I said. "What is your name?" He said, "I cannot remember. I have been a dragonfly too long, but there is hope for you." He directed me to a nearby alchemy table and told me to nibble a bit of this and that. He had the antidote memorized. I followed his instructions and soon I felt the worst pins and needles I have ever endured. I passed out, and when I awoke, I was me again. I rushed over to the dragonfly and opened his jar. Voice in my head, but it was weaker, distant somehow. "It is too late for me," he said. "The antidote cannot fix me. I am more dragonfly than man now. Please, reseal my jar. It brings me comfort." I did as I was asked, then placed him on a chair while I retrieved my clothes. I then went to the long table where I had eaten. "The soup," said the insect I would later come to think of as Mr. Dragonfly. I turned and smiled at him. We were having the same idea. I carried the soup pot to where Mother lay, opened her mouth and splashed some inside. "It will take time. Free the others and leave," said Mr. Dragonfly. "Why can I only hear you inside my head?" I asked. He told me that the other insects had been there far longer than him, and they had forgotten how to communicate with words long ago. I listened closely to a nearby butterfly. I could hear a faint weeping inside my head, nothing more. I opened all the jars, then turned to leave, and saw a fat moth with grey wings lumbering out of a pile of dirty clothes where Mother had been. I scooped her up, sealed her in a jar, then hid her at the back of an ingredients cupboard. I could hear her hissing at me in my mind. I turned to Mr. Dragonfly. "Do you want to come with me?" I asked. "Yes, please," he replied. "Let us go." I grabbed his jar, unlocked the door and opened it. I found myself face to face with the brothers. Oh no, indeed. Luckily, I had surprise on my side. I drew my sword and ran at them. They were so surprised to see me, it took a moment for them to realize I was going for the exit, not them. They shrank back as I rushed past, and soon I had reached the hidden door that led out to the city. I pulled a rusty wall chain, and the opening appeared. But before I could get outside, the eldest brother jumped on my back and tore open my scars. I shook him off, making sure not to drop Mr. Dragonfly, then stumbled out into Windhelm. I lost my footing and went to the ground. "Roll!" cried Mr. Dragonfly inside my mind. Face came down, smashing a flagstone next to my head. The brothers had followed me outside. They each had a weapon, and it was clear they wanted me dead. I regained my feet and brandished my sword at them. "Back," I yelled. "I will let you live if you walk away." "Mother wouldn't turn you back," said the middle brother. "What did you do to her?" "I cured her of her ugliness and put her somewhere safe," I replied. Townsfolk stopped to see what was happening. We were attracting a crowd. I turned to the onlookers and said, "These men held me against my will. Call the guard." My words were met with stony avidity. Then someone threw a bottle at me. The eldest brother shouted, "This filthy Khajiit broke into our home. He was looking for skooma money, no doubt." The crowd was getting nasty, and as another bottle smashed near my feet, I saw two guards at the back of the group turn and walk away. "Run," said Mr. Dragonfly inside my head. He did not have to tell me twice. The youngest brother took a swipe at me with his sword. I leapt back, overturned the cart of cabbages, and fled. I sped past the graveyard into the marketplace and glanced behind me. I had lost most of the crowd, but the brothers were still on my tail. I rushed through the main gate, out onto the bridge. I was exhausted, but while my legs had been running, Mr. Dragonfly's mind had come up with a plan. As the brothers stepped out of the gate, panting and furious, I walked out onto the ledge to the left before the first stone arch. I sheathed my sword and held out Mr. Dragonfly's jar. "Do you know who this is?" I shouted. "I don't care, all those bugs look the same to me," replied the middle brother. "Stay there, you coward. You're a dead man." I waited until all three brothers stood near me at the edge. "Do you love your mother?" I asked. "Yes," sniffed the youngest. "Tell us where she is and we'll kill you quickly," said the eldest. "Here," I replied. Then I threw Mr. Dragonfly off the bridge. Yes, I am very proud of him. I think he may have used up the last of his courage in that moment, though. The brothers all yelled, "No!" and threw themselves over the edge, trying in vain to catch the jar. If I had carried out the plan 30 feet along the wall, they may have survived, but the icy water they landed in was very shallow. There was quite a mess. For a second, I was worried about Mr. Dragonfly, but then I spotted his jar bobbing in the bloody water. I made my way down to the river and retrieved him. He thanked me, and I asked him again if he wouldn't rather be released. "No," he said. "I will stay in my jar and in your company if that is okay. I have already forgotten my past life, and even the meanings of these words I am saying are beginning to..." I told him he could stay with me for as long as and asked what I should call him. "Mother scratched my initials on the lid of my jar," he said. "I no longer know what they mean." "They seem to say Mr. D," I replied. "Do you mind if I call you Mr. Dragonfly?" He said that was fine. He then said that I would no doubt lose the ability to hear him soon, but so far that has not been the case. Ever since my transformation, I have been able to randomly pick up his thoughts. I can also sometimes understand horses, fleas, too. Their thoughts contain words as we know them, but I can usually decipher the overall gist. Mr. Dragonfly's fear about losing his words has also not come to pass. I think our little conversations are good for his mind. Anyway, that is how Mr. Dragonfly and I met. It was a long story. I hope I did not bore you. I am glad you enjoyed it. Telling it was easier than living it, my friend.